Beto, why don't you tell us about your wonderful career?
Thank you, Kerry, so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be talking to you and to your audience. I'm sure your audience is made up of a lot of great people, because if people follow you, automatically means that they're good people, because the work you've been doing for so many years, making the best out of plants that are healing plants. Have always admired your work, because medicinal plants are here to heal, I believe, and they were placed on this sacred planet of ours for, among many things, to provide healing. And indigenous peoples are the best stewards, I believe, of the medicinal plants that we have. So you asked me to introduce myself. I'm Beto Borges. I'm Brazilian, and I've been working with indigenous peoples and local communities for the past 40 years, mostly in Brazil and elsewhere in the Amazon basin and elsewhere throughout Latin America. I began my work. It was interesting. I got enchanted by a book I was reading by José Lutzenberger, who was a Brazilian scientist who used to be the Minister of Environment in Brazil. You know, nature had given me so much, and I truly felt at that moment that nature had nourished me for so many years. You know, nature nourishes us for so many years. And I think most people, I don't know if it's fair to say this, but I have a feeling that most people take it for granted because of the way that society has been not taking care of nature properly. So at that moment, I figured that, well, it was time for me to try to do something in return. So then I switched my major and I got accepted into UC Berkeley. I went to study conservation and resource studies. So I began volunteering. I began my first volunteering opportunity was with Greenpeace US and the Fund for Animals. And then I went to volunteer with Rainforest Action Network while I was still pursuing my bachelor's of science and conservation resource studies. And then that volunteer opportunity became a full-time job, and I was there at Rainforest Action Network in San Francisco. I began doing research as a consultant still to Forest Trends, where I work now, about the potential for the development of payments for ecosystem services in Brazil.
I think a lot of people think of, sadly, they think indigenous people are a thing of the past, that we don't really share this planet so much anymore with indigenous. Can you talk to more about what's really the truth here?
People don't quite understand. Indigenous people are perhaps still kind of, they have more of a vision of how Hollywood portray indigenous peoples, right? And from this notion of the bon sauvage, in idyllic tribes and all that, to wild people and all that. And I think people don't quite understand that indigenous people are people just like us, that they are those that are still able to be living in their traditional homelands, are people who have the right, the same right that we have to basic human needs, for our rights to be respected. Indigenous peoples are coming from lands that are theirs over generations, and lands that they have been good stewards of. And I think that's one of the main distinctions between indigenous societies. They have learned to coexist with their natural environment, and they have an intrinsic understanding of the natural environment around them. I think they have less of an utilitarian relationship with the natural environment around them than we do. But indigenous societies are extremely important, and you know, not only they deserve the right, they deserve the right to be respected on their own right, not because they are stewards of about 80% of the global biodiversity, from which we all benefit. Most of the forests globally that are still remaining are in the hands of indigenous and other traditional societies. Therefore, they are active stewards of also the clean air that we breathe, providers of ecosystem services to all of us.
Can you explain that more, and what do you mean by that, and how they are providing an ecosystem service?
So these are the services that nature provide for us, such as the clean air that we breathe, also biodiversity, the services that we receive from the different variety of foods, the pollinators, that is also an ecosystem services. These are services that exist because there is an ecosystem, so forest or a biome or different types of vegetation in an environment that provides the conditions for nature to do what it does best, to provide means for us to live.
They do hold this really important position of being traditional knowledge holders and stewards of these environments. So can you speak more about these pressures that indigenous face and how you've interacted with that?
Just the thirst that industrial society has for the natural resources that are in indigenous lands, in terms of minerals, in terms of wood, in terms of other natural resources that come from indigenous people's lands. Oil development, throughout Amazon, in Ecuador, we've done my days of Rainforest Action Network. We worked with the indigenous organizations there, Confenhain and others that were really, to this day, continue to fight the oil industry, which has polluted their water sources and created a lot of problems. We have a lot of problems with gold mining that uses mercury, that is polluting the rivers in the Amazon. So every indigenous territory that is somewhat close to a city, they are being threatened. If you take satellite images, you see that the state of conservation of indigenous lands compared to areas around them is astounding. It's called the deforestation belt. So if you look at the southern Amazon, the dark green areas are forests, and the brownish, yellowish are deforested areas, which are extensive farms. Particularly in the Amazon, you'll be looking at soy farms. Companies are invading indigenous lands, killing the leadership of indigenous peoples. Now, if all that wasn't enough, there are narco traffickers throughout the Amazon that are they're fighting one another, and that's another huge problem.
Is there some message for the world about indigenous territories, indigenous right, and working with indigenous?
A call to the world would be, let's remember that others have the same right that we have, right, to the basic human needs, and respect indigenous peoples for the rights that they have for their homelands, which have been passed to them from generation to generation. Everything that we do has a consequence, from our consumption to everything that we do. If we were to trace where the products that we use, where does that come from? Nothing is for granted. Everything has an impact. All these people are coming from somewhere. All these people, they have been passed on this forest from generation to generation, forests that they are being the best stewards of. And it is because of indigenous peoples that we still have most of the forests globally left, and because they're there. And also 80% of the world biodiversity, it is conserved within this forest, and tons and tons and tons of greenhouse gases it's stored in the forest globally because of the stewardship of indigenous peoples. So let's just hear to what they're saying, and let's pay attention to what they're saying, respect what they're saying, because they are truly legitimate voices that need to be heard.